Okay. Mm, mm, mm. All right. Oh, damn. I don't need that up, so you cannot minimize when you're recording. Well, that's awesome.
Try pressing share screen.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's a good idea.
And if you just press screen, it'll let you follow whatever.
Oh, okay. Wow. Real boomer moment there. And I'm a millennial, so that's sad. Anyway, moving on from that. Let's see. So, first things first, a little bureaucratic stuff. So, um, with cycle papers, the submission for uh, the cycle A rewrite is up and will be up for a week, basically until next weekend after next, or no, next weekend. Yeah. And the same, I'll get back cycle paper B this weekend, and then you'll have 2 weeks from there, and then C next weekend, and you'll have 2 weeks from there to do your rewrite on your first one. And the rewrite is the same grade point value as the original, so do your damnedest, right? Also, on that same line, please put your name on both the document itself and the Word or Adobe file, because I bulk download them, and if your name's not on there, then I have to do investigative work, and who knows, I could mess up and not be your paper. So don't leave your name on it. I prefer it to be a Word document just because it's easier to do uh, edits and comments with track changes. But if you really have to turn it in as a Adobe file, that's fine. I'll still be able to do comments on there or the rubric. All right. And then with the one paragraph responses, just make sure you're engaging with the text, right? Don't just say, hey, St. Anthony was a cool guy and he lived at this time and he saw demons, right? That's not engagement with the text. So you don't have to do actual quotes, but just, paraphrase or a for instance from the text that shows that you've read it and that you've thought about something from the text, right? Let's see. I think that's it for our regular stuff. And then next week, we will be doing a mapping of Christianization assignment in lieu of doing the one paragraph response. So that'll be a little different, maybe a little easier, maybe a little harder, depending on who you ask. Oh, I did not want a copy of that atlas. I did not either. So we'll be reading these texts. Everybody will be reading these texts, right? But you have been assigned by yours truly to one of 7 groups to write, well, not write, but basically read the text and then fill out the survey form that will then populate the ArcGIS map, right? And the questions are on, let's see, is this it? Yeah, it is. Are on Canvas right there, right? So Dr. Stirk put this up. So the things you'll be looking for in the text. So basically have this beside you when you're reading the text for your particular region. And then the most important part is here are the groups, right? So I threw everybody from both my sections together in one document, but basically the number will match the region you're doing. So number one will be Armenia, number two, Persia, number three, Ethiopia, and so on and so forth, right? So it's not a group assignment. I just grouped them together so you can see what region you're working on, and that's how I did the random number generator sort of dealing. So please do note down which number you are, so you know which region you're working on. Yeah, I think that's basically any questions on that. Yes.
Does this mean that we're gonna have to be working together like on the project inside class?
No. So it's not a group assignment. The only purpose of this is to get you your region that you're working on. So you don't, have to email everybody and get on WhatsApp and whatnot, sort of collaborate. So it's just to get the regions you're working on is the purpose of these group numbers. So everybody noted that. All right. And if you don't remember which one you're working on, just email and I'll still have this available later on. So any questions about the assignment itself, the particulars of it? And we'll talk more about it too, of course, as we go through these accounts. Let's see. And go back. I think that was it. Okay, yeah. So now on to the fun stuff. Let's see. So first of all, what is happening? Right? We've gone through, basically the era of the early church, the era of persecution, right? No, I shouldn't say persecution, scare quotes, because it is an era in which Christianity is officially a legal religion, right? So, but it's not always active, like you go out in the street and you're a Christian, you're going to get stabbed or something. It's not quite that endemic, the persecution, despite what some of the accounts would have you believe. So you have that. Then you have the peace under Gallienus, and then Diocletian's persecution, and now you have the era that we are currently in, the triumph of the church, right? But then there's a century or more of controversies between Christians. So in the midst of all this, right? What is the monastic movement? Why is it happening now, right? From the lectures and from your readings, right? What do you take to be the significance of the start of this movement? Daniel, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the monastic movement is sort of a refocus of Christianity into perhaps, well, in some cases, especially some of the early accounts, in sort of living like Christ, so being almost nomadic per se, and depriving yourselves from pleasures or from like just even daily like stuff like regular food, for example, or regular sleep. Especially early on in Hampton and even in second book, last day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I could go on and say how it's like sort of developed. It's like a communal sort of aspect where there's less so of the whole living like Christ per se, and more so of like a devotion of the mind and just like focusing on both scripture and the text.
And we'll come back to that with Benedict, definitely. So what else? What about the era makes this? Because, we talked a little. There are precedents for this, right? You have the I'm probably going to misspell this. But the Essenes, the Qumran community, right? In the Dead Sea, right? So basically, they're doing this in the first century BC, first century AD, living this type of, Semitic lifestyle already, right? In preparation for what they think will be the last day, the Messiah returns, he kills all the Romans, and the kingdom of God will be on earth, right? And then you have, right, Jesus and John the Baptist. John the Baptist. Yeah, that also practice a similar ascetic way of life and itinerant way of life, right? But they're more itinerant preachers than living together in an ascetic community, right? And so these strains, and we've seen other figures pop up. Origen was sometimes, sort of this itinerant preacher, very ascetic to the point of self-mutilation, according to one account, right? It's like, you know what? I really don't want to be tempted, so I'm cutting it off, right? It's this strain. It has a long period, right? But then when we get to the fourth century, right? Ideally, according to people like Eusebius, right? We are in the kingdom of God. The Roman Empire has become Christian, right? So why are these people running out into the desert and doing all this crazy shit, right? This should be it's sort of the end goal of this line of Judeo-Christian thought that they have triumphed in the world. So why are people then fleeing the world and going out into this more extreme lifestyle? In the age of the martyrs, it sort of made sense. You're preparing for martyrdom. You're about to be, killed, so you don't want to be connected to the world. But why? Yeah.
I kind of thought of it almost like how popular culture today, like Christianity became part of this like larger culture. People were more extreme thought is like kind of being watered down almost and wanted to keep with that like original, more extreme version.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big one. Because remember, back, further back in the second century, when we read the uh, apostolic constitutions of Hippolytus, right? He basically is envisioning the entire Christian community of Rome living this sort of ascetic, separated lifestyle, right? So his and the apostolic the apostolic constitutions are extremely popular documents. They get reprinted in, Ethiopia, Syria, Armenia, all over within and outside of the Roman world. So it's propounding this idea that all Christians should live this way. But obviously, when we get 250 years later to the fourth century, right, is that the case, right? Especially when you're dealing with people with power and money, right? As we explored with the life of Constantine. Is that the case? Right? And so, yes, this is very much like, okay, we're going to go back, right? And we're going to actually live the lifestyle of these previous people and of the early church, right? I think you had some.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, just having, you're a Christian growing up at a time when it's legal, and for like the last like 100 years or so, there's been less persecutions. You're really growing up with like a lot of models that like sacrificed a lot that you're not being asked to.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think might also be like a motivation for these people to kind of feel like something to live up to, something that they need to sacrifice, but nobody's coming for them. So, but like they're still left with this like big tradition of like, all right, what are you going to give up for it? And it's like, well, if I give up my old life and start a new life, it's like they're not murdering like their former selves, but they are kind of like changing their lives in such a way where like the cells are kind of dead to it. So I think that might be another reason why it's like they have standards to live up to.
Exactly. And we sort of explored this with the ecclesiastical history, right? So Eusebius having grown up in that first great piece, right, from the 260s onward to the time of Diocletian, right? He's sort of saying the same thing, like, wow, look at all these great martyrs. He's writing about the martyrs of Leon. He's writing about all these different martyrdoms that happened over the course of the late second and third century, and looking back on this as an age of heroes. And this is how Christianity expanded by the blood of the martyrs, right? And then he looks at his own time and it's like, oh, we got Paul of Samosata, we got all these crazy people, we got Christians fighting each other. Like, this is not cool, right? Like, if only we could go back, right? And so, yeah, the monastic movement is sort of that way of reaccessing that earlier age, right? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of piggyback off what you said. It's like they have to prove their worthiness to God to set themselves apart from lower non. That's like he plays an extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
And we consider like a form of pilgrimage. Like,
Yes.
follow the path that your ancestors before you, teachers before you took.
That's a big one. Yeah.
To be one step closer to the religion, to be closer to God.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you're actually able to demonstrate it. It's not just, hey, I go to the church on, Sunday and, he said, he reads the Bible and, prays or whatever. And it's like, okay, I'm good. Like these guys are like, no, that's not enough. I have to sort of make this actual connection, right? And that's how I actually get close to God. There is also, so of course, a philosophic parallel, right? So we've talked about it a bit, but you have Stoicism and then Neoplatonism. And various other strains of Greek thought, right, that have the same idea, right, of disciplining the body, not really being driven by the passions of, and this is big with who, right? Anyone want to take a guess? What group of people?
You repeat the question.
So I'm saying Hellenistic philosophy, Stoicism, Neoplatonism, has the same sort of valence of disciplining the body, not being attached to the world, of accessing the power of the one, the good, by living a simple life, right? Who would this be popular with? Well, it's popular with monks. They definitely take in a lot of it into their writings, but who else?
The lower class.
No.
Platonists?
Well, yes, it would be, but
Upper class?
yes, the as they're famously called the better part of mankind. Right? Because this is traditional Roman values, right? If you look at Roman history at all, like the idea of, following the way of the ancestors is just very austere. So, mos maiorum, just throw out a Latin word there, is a way of the ancestors. And how the Romans tell their history is that these old guys, the old senators and old rulers in the days of the ancient kings of Rome, were these very pious, very simple, very austere. They didn't have well hoarded up. They didn't wear silk. They didn't do it. They wove their own clothes and they went out and plowed the fields. And then they would go fight a battle and go back and plow the fields again. And they were very much, of this ascetic ideal, right? You could reconstitute them in the same way. And so Roman aristocracy naturally saw, and then philosophy backed it up, right? in Stoicism and Neoplatonism, that this is the better way of life. And of course, Christianity comes along and the monastic movement comes along, especially, and these guys see, oh, this sounds familiar. This is why, when we get to Merovingian Gaul, in Gaul in particular, almost every leading monk and bishop is an aristocrat, right? These guys have all, and not like Anthony, they don't all sell off their properties, right? So these are very rich, senatorial background, elite men for the most part. There are some women, but men for the most part that see this as the perfect way of life and are willing to go into it because they see it as a way to access the divine, right? So I think that's enough context. And then, we've talked about holy men, and you probably watched the video on. Did I play the origin of Christian saints in this class? No?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one on like how saints developed and similarities with pre-Christianity with okay. Right. And in that he mentions the rise of the holy man, right? So
What at this point, like, was like salvation seen through like faith or like faith and acts? Like, how does that balance work?
great question. So basically the answer is it's up for grabs, right? Don't know how well, yeah, we'll probably get into it when we get to Augustine. But there's this group called the Pelagians who specifically believe that it is through works and that it's accessible to everyone. So if you act rightly, and they're sort of one of these groups trying to bring back mass asceticism. So all Christians should act in this way. And it's very popular in Gaul and Spain. So that's a live debate throughout this whole period in the East and the West. But the major people of the church that will be discussing, like Augustine, right, will say grace, grace, grace alone, right? Because it's impossible for a human to ever, sort of do enough work, act good enough, be, self-effacing enough to access, the privilege of going to heaven by their own power alone. You have to, have God's grace in that. So, live debate, it'll definitely be popping up in the next weeks. So that's very much up for grabs during this period of time. Great question. Anyone else? Any other comments on, in general, the rise of monasticism before we get into the specific text? All right. Going, gone. Let's see. I can close it. So, did not pass out the. Go ahead and sign in on there. So, starting with the life of Anthony, right? What are the different forms of asceticism that he practices? Okay. Anybody? Yeah.
I mean, he gives up all his property in the beginning, so that's like the first thing he does. His property, he sells his stuff. It's money.
Right. But then what does he do? What type of asceticism is the first thing he practices after he does all
And he doesn't like bonds bring.
Mm-hmm. So he's itinerant. What else does he do?
Doesn't try to go much.
Right. So he does cenobitic. Any other one?
By himself for a couple of days.
Bam! He did the triple crown, right? So he gets anchorite as well. So he practices all big three forms of asceticism. Mhm. Now, in what ways, and remembering that he started his monastic career circa 270. So this is before the persecution of Diocletian, which is 304 through somewhere about that. And it's before Nicaea. So yeah, way before that, about the same time like we talked about with the Council of Antioch and Paulus Samosata. So at this point, the idea of being martyred is still very much possibility up to here, right? So in what ways does this harsh lifestyle prepare you for the act of martyr? Yes.
Like denying himself of everything. Be on the ground, stuff like that. And he does a lot
Yes.
so if he does, or does die.
Exactly. So he's completely devoid of, and remember, this is a man whose family owned hundreds of acres in the richest agricultural part of the empire, Egypt, right? In the Fayum, which is really good, you know, like it's like millennia of silk, right? So this is the best farmland, right? And he's gone from that, this huge estate, to sleeping in a tomb, lying on a mat, eating shitty bread and salt, right? So, yeah, this naturally disciplines the body and prepares you mentally and physically to go against any of the tortures we saw in like the Passion of Perpetua or the account of the martyrs, right? It's great mental and physical training for it. It also has so thinking of discipline, right? And this parallel, which I'll probably be returning to again and again, between the life of the monk and the life of the soldier, right? Roman military practices the same type of discipline, right? You live in a tent with 12 dudes, you sleep on a reed mat, you eat shitty food. Although, actually, the like fried lard with like olive oil and spices on it looks okay. Like it's a little better than an MRE, right? So it's like but mostly shitty food. You're going to be eating barley and whatever else you can get with that. You're going to be doing lots of manual labor because all the infrastructure that survives across Europe, Africa, and Asia today from the Roman Empire, most of it was built by who? Roman soldiers, Roman legionaries, right? And so they're constantly out here doing this manual labor, physical labor, right? And in fact, when units of the army don't, right? And you can find this in plenty of Roman accounts, right? They're like, oh, they're lax, they're getting drunk, they're gambling, they're just, if they're in the East, they've been feminized by the East, right? And so a new general will come in and he's like, oh, this is an undisciplined unit. This is why you're losing. So you might do decimation, where you kill off a tenth of the unit, like every 10th man gets executed by his comrades, right? Or you can send them out and start building shit, building roads, right? You can march them up and down. And you can of course do other forms of corporal punishment, like where you have a person run through and everybody beats them on the back with a stick. You might have seen this. It was in Last of the Mohicans too, British love, reviving this sort of stuff. or whippings, or any number of grievous. But this is all about disciplining the body and making sure that you're able to act as a soldier, right? Now, the other thing is you're ready to fight, right? That you're a fit weapon in war. What is the monk? What is Anthony preparing to fight? Who is he at war with?
Sin.
Not just sin.
Demons. Real demons.
Yes, real demons, right? Right? They are actively pulling on him, biting him, tempting him to return to the ways of the world, right? And so what we're seeing here is not this, like philosophic, like, oh, there's the logos and there's this and there's a material world and then up here is God. This is actual, and there's even an account from later on that I really like in the 7th century, where this guy is basically talking about the old sites in Constantinople and all the old statues of like the emperors and gods and whatnot. And he basically goes through and he gives you a tour, but he says, well, this statue actually has a demon in it, and we don't really go down that street. And this building has, evil spirits in it, and, is the home of demons, and so don't go there. Or, all this sort of thing. As we saw in the lecture earlier in the week, sometimes people would take active measures against these statues, right? They would break them, or they would carve crosses in them to get out the demon, right? So this is a very live issue. They see this as part of reality. Now, of course, being the ascetic, disciplining your body, enables you to actually see beyond and actually see the demons and deal with them and hopefully defeat them, right? And not fall prey to their wiles, right? Let's see. What is Anthony's view of the physical body? We covered this a little bit, but any other things? Yeah.
I feel like it's he views it as like needs of the body is like secondary to his devotion. Like it mentioned when the demons beat him up or whatever, they think he's dead, but it's so weak that he can't walk back, so he has someone carry him back to the tomb so he can continue worshiping.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's just how I saw it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is very much secondary, right, to him. What else? And why do you think the body is so denigrated? Yes.
Actually, I just have a question.
Yeah.
So, in life he was wealthy, right? His parents died, and he had a sister, like Aunt Sissy. I'm wondering why he did not give his wealth to his. He threw her in a covenant. Like, she had no say in it.
Yeah, and women could inherit wealth in the Roman world. So yeah, it's one of those things. Like he's like, hey, I'm going to live the holy life. You are too. And gets back to right. I forgot who was it that was bringing up their topic about Benedict. That was you, sir?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll get to you in a second. But basically, the idea that, this harsh level of discipline that we'll get to with the rule of St. Benedict, right, is there, but that it sort of exists throughout the pre-modern, and it's really, even to some extent afterward. So it's like the family sort of decides, right? And at that point, Anthony is the remaining male, the paterfamilias. So he's like, hey, I'm divesting myself of this stuff, and you should too. Now, of course, in the case of like the Cappadocian fathers that we briefly covered, it was the sister of Basil that actually was the first one to be like, hey, I'm going to do this holy cool stuff. You guys should do it too. So it can work, sort of, but she was the elder the elder child. So those hierarchies, those dynamics, the networks that you're a part of, right? Sort of sometimes determine these things for you instead of the other way around. Let's see. Is there any? What do we learn? The last thing I'll cover with Anthony. What do we learn about his theological views? Now, keeping in mind who's writing this, and Athanasius is his disciple, so he knows him personally. He's known members of his community personally. But Athanasius was also one of the leading members involved in the Arian controversy, right? So, can we even parse out what is Athanasius retconning some of these things back onto Anthony, and what's Anthony's true views about the cosmic order? Is that possible? Yes.
I wrote my paper arguing that no, the entire structure is that basically an inductive argument saying that like, oh, Anthony's so holy, Anthony's so holy. Look at him playing with the Holy Spirit. Oh, by the way, Arianism's wrong.
Yeah, and he knew it already, even though for most of his career, Arianism didn't even exist. Yeah, it seems sort of sketch. And there are even things like, if you remember the part where the sons of Constantine send him a letter, and it's like, oh, great holy man, please teach us your ways. We noble Christian princes want to learn from you. And Anthony is basically like, forget about it. These are just men. I don't care about their praise. That's stupid. And you shouldn't, he tells the other monks, hey, you shouldn't be flattered by this either, right? We should just be focused on Jesus, right? So that in and of itself is like a backhand to like Constantius and the other sons, right? And it's sort of foreshadowing that they'll be in the pro-Arian party, right? It's another one of these, like, did Anthony actually do this, or is this retconning back on that period and saying he knows, right, that what they will become, right, and how they will be opponents of the true religion. Okay? Let's see. Let's move on to Benedict, good old Benedict, right quick. So, who was Benedict, and why is he writing this amazing guideline? It wouldn't have been known as a rule at that time. We call it a rule. But why is he writing it? Who is his audience? We've now moved 200 years after even the writing of the life of Anthony. So we're now in 516 in Italy, in the West, right? But the life of Anthony has had this outsized effect and sort of, even propels the monastic movement further beyond Egypt and the Levant. So what is Benedict doing? Yeah.
He's like writing a guideline for the abbots on how they should run the monasteries.
Yeah. But why is that necessary? We've had monks for 200 years at this point. Why do we need this new guy, this law student from Central Italy, to tell us how to do this? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because like with everything else, people got slovenly. They're changing the way that monks are living over time.
Yes. Yeah, we especially see this in his first chapter, which is one of my favorite pieces, where he really goes in on every other type of monk except the Cenobitic. Especially this word is bad. This is a horrible. It's not horrible translation, but landlopers. Yeah, this was done in the 1890s. This translation, so it works, but the word it's translating is this Greek compound word gyrovek, right? Which means those who go around. And will somebody read this section off because it's funny. Yeah, right.
But the fourth class of monks, that is that called landlopers, who keep going their whole life long from one province to another, staying 3 or 4 days at a time in different cells as guests.
Always roving and never settled, they indulge their passions and the cravings of their appetite, and are in every way worse than the Sarabates. It is better to pass all these over in silence than to speak of their most wretched life.
Yeah, he's not a fan. Despite in this period, right, some of the most popular, right, ascetics / monks that we read about are of this type. But basically, he just slags them all off right here, right? It's like, no, these aren't even worth talking about. I'm going to cut myself off before I can say anything else about them. Let's just go back to talking about the proper form of monasticism, Cenobite, right? Wow. So, what else is he doing here, right? He's setting up this hierarchy of what is the best way to practice asceticism. Clearly, he wants to set rules to bring it back to some sort of pure form of life without these sort of vagaries where, yeah, you can be an anchorite, right? You can go out there in the wilderness by yourself, but how do you know you're going to actually defeat the devil like Anthony or Saint Martin, right? You don't know that. You could get God, right? So what else is he doing here? And who is his audience, right? Monasticism has existed for 200 years. Like, who is he talking to? Would this be for people outside of asceticism or people who are currently monks, but they're living one of these other forms of life and he's trying to reform them?
More like perspective on.
Yeah.
Anyone who might be thinking about becoming a monk, like, don't.
Yeah, don't do any of these other ones. If you are, this is the only way to do it. Let's see. What other? So because remembering the life of Anthony and other hagiographies of monks that were produced in this gap between the two are great narratives, right? But they also were used as sort of these guidelines, these rules. This is how you're supposed to act as an ascetic. So how does the life of Anthony measure up to what Benedict is propounding? Yeah.
So, well, beyond just like the specific sort of strict rule-based lifestyles that they live, I think that in the life of Anthony, it was more focused about depriving himself of like his connection to the world. So that it was more like a philosophic almost asceticism more than like a very religious asceticism. Versus, I think the rule of Saint Benedict focuses more on like discipline, but not like self-flagellation, like to like necessarily maybe even a ridiculous point.
Right.
It's just discipline like prayer at these times, waver at this time. You can eat, but like eat the proper amount and eat the right foods.
Yeah, one is more philosophic, and the other one is more, I don't know, either legalistic or institutionalized, right? Spelling is not my jam today. Institutionalized, right? So this isn't going to be left up to the vagaries of whatever this one monk wants to do. We're going to have a rule that's established that actually tells you how to act in these situations so that you aren't tempted, so that you aren't left to that moment of temptation, of indulging in wine or overeating or, not doing your fair share of the work in the monastery and slacking off and going to take a nap somewhere, right? There's going to be a rule to govern all these things, right? So, real quick, I wanted to show a different opinion than we have gotten from our text about the monastic movement. So this is from an early 5th century. So early 5th, it's like, I think he's writing in 418, right? So this is 3 years after Rome was sacked by the Visigothic war leader Alaric, right? This is this big moment in late Roman history. And his own home in Aquitaine has been plundered by the Visigoths as well. And so he's returning from Rome, where he served as urban prefect, to Gaul. But in the midst of his journey, so this is Romantius, and he's a pagan, right? He comes across this island off the coast of Italy. So will somebody volunteer to read that one? Starting at as we advance? Yeah.
As we advance at sea, Contraria
Mm-hmm.
now rears itself, an ill-kept isle full of men who shun the light, their own name for themselves. It's a Greek one.
Monaco, yeah.
Monopoly. Because they wish to dwell alone with none to see. They fear fortune's wounds, as they dread her outrages. Would anyone to escape misery live of his own choice in misery? What silly
Fanaticism.
fanaticism, but sordid brain is it to be unable to get blessings because of terror of this? Whether like are like prisoners, demand the appropriate for their deeds, or whether their melancholy hearts are swollen with black bile. Bile?
Mm-hmm.
So that Homer assigned elements of excessive bile as cause of deadly low forms,
Mm-hmm.
trouble soul, scepter, so sorrow, that men say that stricken youth conceived its loathing for humankind.
So, what is Romantius's view of the monastic movement? Yes.
Kind of sees them like antisocial weirdos.
Yes. Very much so. And in fact, in another translation of this I have, it doesn't say distorted, it says demented brain, which of course is the famous Roman tactic of if you really think somebody's weird and out there, you just call them crazy. And you immediately like, oh, you believe that? No, you're not. Okay. So this is how, and the funny thing is, even though this is a pagan aristocrat saying this, there would be some aristocrats and other Romans that would see them, even Christians, that would see them the same way, right? So we have this interesting thing where we have this whole intellectual community very focused on building the monastic movement, and some of them even trying to re-expand asceticism to the whole Christian community. And then we have this at the same time. And how that, how different communities of, all classes sort of deal with Christianization will be the topic for the coming weeks, both within and without the Roman world. So next week we'll be looking at it around the edges of the Roman world in all these various places. And that'll be very interesting. But keep this in mind that it's not, the text we really love the holy men and women that they talk about. But remember, there's other stuff going on at the same time. Just keep that in mind. All right, if you have any questions, you can either come up now or talk to me via email. Questions on your rewrite, questions on turning in. Like if you need an extension for Cycle Paper C, let me know. The portal is open until Sunday night at midnight. So you'll have an opportunity, if you need the extension, to have it. Don't just decide, hey, I'm just going to turn my shit in on Sunday. But if you really need it, turn it in.
But I was in a down second reply.
Okay.
But I just want to like ask. You have to take like the primary source as like a reason to like reference it,
Yes.
and then our thesis is like you can use like one of the questions like in paragraph.
Yes. So you can, yeah, you could do that, or if you already have your own idea of what you want to write about from what you read in Eusebius, you can do that.
Okay.
But the questions definitely help with formulating a thesis if you don't have a particular idea you want to run with. And so, yeah. And then just send it to me if you need to, and I can, help you with that. If you have any question about like, is this a strong thesis or not? So,
Yeah, I'm gonna email it.
okay,
Thank you.
no problem.
I'm just wondering, what is your thesis on, or what is your like main work or PhD?
Oh, my dissertation?
Yeah, your dissertation.
Yes. Well, actually, let me stop share.
Is it anything like based off this class, and is that why you're teaching it? Or is it
Yes. So pause.